Hi, I'm Sheila Tejada, and I've been working as an actress since I've been a kid. But in Hollywood, professionally, I've been doing it for about 5 years. And my most notable credits have been on Ray Donovan, this indie feature called Driving While Black, and I recently shot a series called The Experiment, which will air on the Urban Movie Channel.
What got you interested in acting?
Well, when I was younger, I was the only child for about 7 years of my life. And so that, just trying to deal with boredom and being on my own and living in my imaginary world to, let the days go by with some excitement. But also, I lived with my grandparents for some stint of time. And my grandpa, he would always be curled up. It makes me kind of emotional because I can vividly see him just like sinking into his armchair watching westerns, John Wayne, and I saw him transported into that world. And um, he had a lot of pain because he went through dialysis, and then I would see that and I would want to do the same that the westerns did for him and put on shows for him and just put a smile on his face. And I saw the power and impact of entertainment, not only in my own life, but also for my grandfather. So from there on, I just wanted to bring that joy, that adventure to other people's lives.
Have you met many other actors that feel the same way about cinema and its power?
People do it for different reasons. I know some people do it because it was either that or a life of crime, and that was like their saving grace. Mine is, I mean, it could have, I don't know about a life of crime, but definitely I could have been living a life of regret if I didn't pursue it. So I do find that a lot of people who do pursue the arts for the long haul realize that there's this responsibility to do something with entertainment.
Well, being an actor, that you don't really have time for a life of crime because you always have to pursue auditions and self-improvement. And does it
Right.
basically consume your entire life? Does it give you any real free time?
Yeah, it's very interesting that you point that out because that very much is the grind. And a lot of people who want to pursue the arts don't realize how much of a grind it is and how much, like you said, like self introspection is like necessary for this career. You think you can just like walk into an audition room and you'll nail it, but no, it requires a lot of training and a lot of knowing oneself.
And you had a audition recently, and the reason why I bring that up, just so everyone knows, that we have to re-record this interview because we didn't get any of your audio last time. But I remember some of those things I wanted to make sure that we caught this time.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So, well, I've had several, but I think the audition you were talking about was the Shameless audition. Is that the one?
Yep.
Okay. So that's an example of working on oneself because sometimes we put this facade of confidence on walking into a room, and then once we're in that room, for example, that particular room was with Regina King. It was a producer session and with a director because she directed that particular episode. And I was like trying to be all confident, like I got this, like cool girl, like, hey, what's up? What's up? And then I see her and I pretend I'm cool. And then when I get into the audition and say my lines, after the first line, I like froze and I left the planet. My body was there, but I was completely out of the room. And it's just one of those things where you just have to be so confident inside and out, like in your core, that nothing can shake you. And I think it had been a while since my last audition, so I was trying to really impress them. But when you get to a place where you don't have to impress anyone and you're just there because you enjoy like the material and the craft, then nothing can phase you.
Was it the
So
atmosphere itself that caused you to freeze up, or was it the people involved, or what triggered that?
I think it was a combination of I hadn't been going out to auditions. It was kind of a drought for me. I had been stuck in creating my own work, and so I kind of forgot what it felt like to be at the whim of another person's decision. So that pressure, and then coupled with not expecting a room full of people, including Regina King, who I saw in like so many different movies, like Ray. She was amazing in Ray. And so I think it was a combination of that. And when you're out of practice, auditioning is a craft in itself. People don't realize, like, they think they can go to Yale drama school and it's a different beast. It's a different technique in its own.
I
So
sat in on an acting class, and it seemed like it's really grueling, especially if I don't know if it's the same for all instructors for these acting classes, but they are very, very harsh on their students. I don't know if that's to get them used to that grind or if it's just their particular personality.
yeah, I think it's both. I mean, it depends on what teaching style you respond to. But I know for me, it did make me a lot thicker skinned. Like I said, with that audition that I crumbled under like the stress of it, um, I hadn't gone to a hardcore conservatory in a while. I was at one for 4 years, and she was like a drill sergeant. And it does prepare you because nothing can phase you. Like they can throw anything at you, and you're able to be flexible and not crumble under the stress and pressure. So I think it's sometimes necessary to have that.
Are the auditions themselves inviting environments, or are they pretty cold and sterile?
For the most part, I've experienced they are inviting. Like the Shameless audition, they were nice. They weren't condescending in any way. It was all the stuff in my head that was making it bad for me. But for the most part, they are inviting because they understand, like, as actors, what we have to go through. It takes you like an hour in traffic to get to an audition, and then 30 minutes to find parking, and then another 15, 20 to walk to the audition room, and then you're signing in, and then 20 minutes to wait for your name to actually be called, if that. So I think they have a certain amount of respect for what actors go through as well. But yeah,
Have
there's
have any of them been like the cattle calls where you get there and it's just like 50 people going out the producer's door?
Oh my gosh, yeah. I remember at the start of my career, I would go to anything and everything. And then, yeah, you will be like cattle, like you said, just kind of wrangled up and waiting for hours and hours. You just have to find a way to make it worthwhile, like talking to people in line, just kind of soaking everything in and learning as much as you can. But I try to avoid those now.
Hmm.
Um, but when you're starting out, I think it's part of the experience, the process to experience that.
Is there a little bit of competition when you're waiting with other actors when you're about to go in? Is there a little tension there about who's gonna get the role?
Definitely there is, but I feel like for the most part, there's also respect among other. I would hope so. I haven't experienced, anyone trying to be like a diva and like cut other actors in the room down, but that would be interesting. But no, I don't see that because it's also like you don't want that energy like seeping into the audition room, so you kind of keep it either neutral or really positive because casting directors can pick up on that. They don't want that on set. So luckily, I haven't experienced that.
Years and years ago, when The Punisher was filmed here in Tampa, there were casting calls, and the news would cover it, and you would see the people all lined up, and they would all be in costume, or they would all have props or something. When is it appropriate for an actor to alter their appearance for a role they're going for, or to bring in a prop? Is that ever acceptable, or is it only acceptable for very specific roles?
Man, I wish someone told me in the beginning of my career that it's probably not a good idea to do that, but I had to learn the hard way. One time I had an audition for the Center Theater Group, which is like the big theater system in LA, like Dorothy Chandler, and it's basically Amundsen. It's like the big theaters, and it was for a Neil Simon play, I forget what it was now, but it was like one of my top, like most embarrassing auditions. And the role was for a nurse. So I said, oh, well, it's a comedy. It's a Neil Simon comedy. I'm going to have kind of like this comical nurse. So I borrowed someone's sexy nurse outfit. And when the casting director stepped out, he looked at me and he said, that's got to go. So luckily I had clothes underneath that because otherwise I would have nothing left. And I just learned that it's not so much about the wardrobe, the props. It's more about the material and your understanding of the material and how you can tell that story. So a lot of casting directors will tell you, especially for film and TV, keep it simple. And if, especially with guns and capes, I mean, it looks kind of, like a
It looks like a
desperate.
Comic-Con.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a Comic-Con convention. And you can do that once you've booked the role and you're taking pictures with bands, but when you're trying to book the room, they just kind of they think it's green. It makes you look green
Mhm.
and like you don't know what you're doing. You're trying too hard, and it distracts them. It distracts them. And literally, I took a workshop with a casting director who said, "Keep it simple," and that was my biggest takeaway. Keep it simple.
So your biggest selling point is going to be your performance, costume, and everything else. That's someone else's responsibility entirely for them to take care of.
Right. That's why they hire the wardrobe people to take care of that.
Uh, Speaking of casting, have you ever run into an issue where you were going for a role, but they said because of your appearance, you were not what they were looking for?
I mean, they've never told me directly.
Hmm.
That could be like the inner dialogue in their minds, but it's never been a direct statement. I mean, if anything, sometimes it would be like refreshing to hear, like, oh, it's because you don't look the role, because we get in our heads and think, oh, we're a terrible actor, and we take it much more than what it is. For the surface value could be like it just your look doesn't work for what they're going for. So it's actually liberating to know, like, well, I can't change the way I look, and if that's the reason they don't want me, then moving on to the next one. It wasn't for me, as opposed to thinking like I wasn't a good actor
Are
because
the
that
casting?
you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Mhm.
I'm sorry.
Oh
Go
no
ahead.
no because, no because like looks, yeah, it hurts because you can't change that, but in a way it's freeing because you learned you can't control that and you can't control that audition. That particular audition it just wasn't for you. So
Are the casting directors pretty straightforward with the reason why you're not chosen, or do they give you any direct feedback after your audition to let you know where you stand in the process, or is it a guessing game once you leave after an
yeah, I
audition?
wish I wish that were the case. Every time you're done with an audition, you're like, nah, sorry. You just didn't do it. And then you would know and not rack your brain afterwards. But oftentimes you would have to reach out to your reps to ask the CD for feedback. They don't give it to you freely. You definitely have to follow up with your reps.
Huh. I guess
Yeah.
do they do that to avoid confrontation, or is it just the way the process
Yeah.
is?
I imagine a lot of angry actors
Uh,
that can't handle criticism after that. Or like it takes them a while to decide. Maybe you're pinned and at the very last minute you're competing with another actor. They
hmm.
decide to go the other way for whatever reason. So sometimes they don't even know the answer right away.
That's understandable. I guess you wouldn't want animosity in your building. It would be a little unprofessional to have people
Right.
just brawling it out in the parking lot or whatever.
Right, exactly.
Um, when we did the first interview, we had talked about ethnicity, and since since you're Filipino, you could play several different types of characters. But which ones do they usually try to pin Filipinos in? Is it like are they like, well, you kind of look Hispanic, but you could also play like Pacific Islander and something like that.
Right. Well, for Filipinos, because like you mentioned, we are kind of ambiguous in that we're not super Asian looking and we're not super Latino looking, so we're kind of in that funky middle. So I find that they easily can put me in a Hawaiian girl role or a hula girl role or a nurse role or a college student, a nerdy role. So those tend to be the typecasts or the stereotypes.
Do you find those stereotypes degrading or hurtful, or just that's the way it is in show business?
I think it's definitely opening up. Hollywood is opening up to more diversity in occupations for people of my type. I definitely have seen that. I'm not offended because both my parents are nurses, so it's kind of truthful and authentic. So I don't. But if I only see Filipinos as nurses on TV, that would be a little offensive, you know. But I do see there is some truth to some of the stereotypes. I mean, we are an island people, so I understand why they put us as hula girls. So, so long as it's not limited to just those, then I feel like there is an opening up in the industry.
What kind of the shift that we're seeing? Do you think within the next 5, 10 years we're going to see more of a diversity in body type and in ethnicities taking over lead roles, or are we gonna have to keep chipping away for years and years and years on end before we see these
I
major
feel like
shifts?
I feel like there's been a major shift. I was reading in an article today in Entertainment magazine that they're saying CAA's roster of clients has increased in diversity by 1,400%. I mean, that's like an
Wow.
insane number. I don't even know how that's possible, 1,400%. But I remember it being that big of a number. And we already see it, like with Melissa McCarthy. She's headlined a lot of her own films. I feel a lot of campaigns are moving in that direction. And before we know it, media will reflect what is really happening in our lives and
Hmm.
not just like this veneer of what, looks glamorous or is like a fantasy. It's going to look more and more like real life, I feel.
Is there do you think there could be a consequence to that when studios are looking for diversity just for diversity's sake? Do you think that could ever actually hinder a project?
I feel it should never be just for diversity's sake. I feel like it should be whatever serves the story. If the story does call for diversity, like if it's set in LA, it should have diversity for sure because LA is like a hodgepodge of people. But if it's like small town, like I don't know, in the Midwest somewhere, then it should reflect that. So
Hmm.
I feel like whatever is the truth of that story should be served.
I think we got the first real look at a high school in New York is when Spider-Man: Homecoming came out. It's because you finally got away from these 30-year-olds playing teenagers. You actually had kids, and
Hmm.
you had a couple white kids, and then every other shade in the spectrum that actually makes up New York, which was
Right.
actually refreshing to see. Even though you could read that it still pissed people off because they're afraid of this white genocide in cinema. But how many times do we see representations that just don't make sense in reality? I can't go to a school here in Tampa and say, hey, it's just all white kids. Like, no, it's going to be a whole bunch of Cubans, a whole bunch of Puerto Ricans, and rednecks. That's what it is. I mean, if we just
Right.
showed all blonde white kids, it wouldn't make sense. It wouldn't be Tampa Bay. It wouldn't make
Exactly.
sense. So I don't know.
Exactly.
I don't know what this. I don't know what the identity politics. It just it doesn't. I don't want to sound like I'm pandering too far to the left for it because I'm not. But I feel reality should be reflected in cinema when you're telling a grounded story. If you want
Hmm.
to tell sci-fi and you want to have everybody look a certain way, it makes sense. It's science fiction. But when you're showing a town somewhere, it should reflect what that town actually is, regardless of who it excludes. If it
Mm-hmm.
excluded, oops, lost you there for a second.
Mm-hmm.
If it excluded Hispanic people, well, if you're in a town that's mainly white people, if it was all Mormons, that's what I would expect. So
Right.
I know both people on both sides of the political spectrum would get upset because they feel that someone's not being represented properly, but we have to understand that not everyone in every aspect of cinema is going to be included. I mean, you can't.
Mm-hmm.
You would hinder. I guess you would hinder a scriptwriter. You would hinder a director by mandatorily forcing them to put someone
Right.
in that didn't make sense.
Yeah.
And it's hard to
Right.
make that argument without people suddenly coming out and saying, "Well, you're being a racist," which it's
I,
it's that thing that we as journalists are just getting so pigeonholed by. Our editors are saying, "Oh, you can't write that. You don't want to piss people off." Like, but then I'm not doing my job as a journalist by asking
right.
questions that are inconvenient.
And that's the white man's burden, right? It's like, oh my gosh, I can't say
Hey, wait
that.
a
I'm
minute.
gonna, right? I'm gonna be
Wait a minute.
pinned as racist. It's so funny, but yeah, I mean, like you said, I agree completely. If it's forced upon a project, it doesn't make sense. Just like everything in life, like there's debates of reverse discrimination, and I mean, if a student's more qualified but they're both qualified, who should go in, the ethnic student or the white student? I mean, that's a tough call. Uh, but for the sake of diversity, I think in Hollywood, it really depends on, like we said, the authenticity and the story.
And when you're looking at qualifications, or a casting director is looking at qualifications for an actor, when the race really doesn't matter, when it comes down, if they're both equally qualified, I mean, how do you make that call then of which person you put in if their ethnicity or their height or weight or whatever doesn't matter? That's, I guess that all comes down to marketing. Who's the most marketable?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Now, in this day and age of social media, whoever has the most followers or whose star meter on IMDb is the highest, I think it will boil down to that.
Well, mine drops like
If
15% every day,
people.
so every time I look at it, it's like it just keeps going down. It's like I only have 3 credits. I mean, people are
Hey, you
knocking down my
gotta.
door to put me on more reality television shows.
Hey, that's going to bring your meter up, right?
I don't want to be on
I
another
think.
one. That was something. And I can't talk
At
about
least
it
you can
because
choose.
my NDA was like 10 pages long.
Oh, wow.
Every infraction, that's $5,000. Like, oh, damn.
That's the story.
Um, oh, what were the other? Oh, yeah. I guess we should get to the topic that we got on last time, which is the whole Harvey Weinstein thing. Um,
Dun dun dun.
yeah, yeah. Um, the thing,
Man.
the thing that intrigues me the most as a journalist is that so many people kept quiet for so long, and that they didn't come out until one person was brave enough to stand up to this bull. But what does that say about the people that are coming out now and trying to grandstand if they put their careers in front of doing the right thing? Like Quentin Tarantino just came out, I think it was yesterday, and said, "Oh, I knew." Well, you knew and you worked with him and you let it happen. You're no better. But
Yeah.
then we get into victim blaming, which I don't really want to do. But if something happens, you don't say it, and you see it keep happening, and you stay quiet. When do you make that jump from being victim to being compliant?
Mhm.
I know that's kind of a tough question to pose to you. It's not really fair, but it's the thing that keeps coming up into my mind, that you can't say that you're always the victim if you never wanted to speak out because you wanted to put fame in front of everything else, in front of morals, I guess.
Right. I mean, that's a larger question, like a larger moral question, like that extends to beyond Hollywood. That's a question of abuse and what the victim is thinking in their head. I know people who have been abused as children, and that they ended up getting into drugs or they were suicidal, and in a way they became compliant, as you said, with their I guess the perpetrators of the abuse, because they kind of figured it would either keep them safe or it'd serve them in some way. And like you said, some of these people were served by being compliant and complacent. Their careers were untouched and maybe even like helped by being quiet this whole time. So it's like a really deep psychology question that all I can say is if I were in that position, and chasing the dream is ultimately something that seems out of reach. But if you are being helped by a Harvey Weinstein, it's kind of like, do I give up the dream? So maybe they were in the position where they felt like it was do or die.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard for us, as we had talked before we started this interview, we can't judge, because we don't know what's going in their minds. We can only pose what we might do. But even then, when we get in that situation, who knows? But I know from my few, instances in the industry where I have been, by directors, asked for sex, or by agents or who have you in the industry, for more than just a professional relationship. All I have to say is, my intention is to pursue this as a profession, and therefore I want to be professional, and not to blur the lines. I feel like with Hollywood, there's a lot of blurring of lines, like the casting couch is a thing. So I think, you just have to stand your ground.
But luckily, SAG actors have a bit of protection against that as opposed to non-union actors, correct?
Right. We at least can report it to a body, the SAG, after a union, whereas non-union actors, I don't even know who they can reach out to. The cops, who are really, they don't really have a recourse. So that's why it is nice to be part of a union, because you have certain protections.
Are there some people in Hollywood that are considered untouchable?
Well, at one point in Harvey Weinstein's heyday, he was one of those, right? I know James Cameron has a reputation of having a hot temper. And I imagine if you were to talk back to him, you would be off his set. So there are a lot of directors that, who are up there that would seem untouchable. Yeah.
So I'm guessing that as these directors get on in years, we're going to see newer up-and-coming people that are hopefully learning from this. And have you experienced with some newer directors a different tone or a different professional attitude towards directing?
It just depends. I think it's all personality based, I know in light of the Harvey Weinstein scandal, I know a lot of people are more aware. And so I think because of that consciousness, it's probably not going to happen as much because they're afraid of that backlash. But yeah, I think it's very much like old Hollywood. I feel that was very, very common, like the studio system days. There's a lot of that, like you said, untouchable power. But I feel now more and more people are very outspoken. So things like that don't necessarily happen as much. I mean, Harvey Weinstein, that happened. It started so long ago. But now in this day and age, I feel like there's more awareness of, civil and human rights.
And I guess social media makes that a little bit easier for someone to say something and have it go from 1 to a million very quickly, whereas it's just going
Right.
to somebody and doing it person by person just wouldn't do the
Oh,
same amount of
exactly.
justice.
Exactly. That's why it spread like wildfire, what happened with Harvey Weinstein. And now there's all these movements or campaigns, like the hashtag Me Too campaign. Like
Hmm.
it started like so fast. So you're absolutely right.
Um, let's see. Something I wanted to bring up when we started, just so people know how we're associated with each other, is through our mutual friend, filmmaker Val Vega. And I already know the answer because we discussed this before. You can't really talk a whole lot about 18 minutes, but
I
that's the
can.
project that you were involved with Val, and
Hmm. Yeah.
I'm hoping to have more news about 18 minutes as it finishes going through the festival cycle. But how was your experience with working with Val?
Oh my gosh. I love Val. Shout out to Val. I'm sure she's gonna see this. Um, I've known her for a while, and I've always known her to be a true artist, not only as an actress, but even like of the fine arts. I had mentioned to you before I had this audition, and I needed to have like a tattoo drawn on my chest, and she actually drew it for me. So from that point on, I knew she was a true artist, and then she just evolved into a director as of late. And I saw her work, and we had spoke about how like she has like such great use of color and such a great eye, and I just love what she does. She looks at it from like an artist's point of view, not just
Mm.
very technical, but the visual is very heavy, like just like you're bombarded with colors and your senses are just like inundated with all these like, very stylistic notes. So
Mhm.
I really like what she does with her projects. So
It's like every scene or every transition is just this new palette of color, very vibrant
yeah,
color. It's
yeah,
amazing what she was able to
yeah,
accomplish with her with her first short film, Acid Pink, which is
yeah.
how I met her. I reviewed it and I was like, wow, this is for being like 2 minutes long. This is amazing stuff.
Yeah, yeah, she's great. I'm really impressed by what she's done. And, she didn't go to film school. She just studied it on her own. And I think that's so admirable
Hmm.
because she's really just going all in it.
Yeah, she just has that natural talent that just comes so easily to being a director, to being a filmmaker.
Yeah,
You had
yeah.
mentioned when we started the interview today that you were at a an NBC uh,
Hmm.
thing, a short film festival. Is that it?
Yeah, it was actually NBC Shorts Fest. It was a diversity Shorts Fest. So, yeah, there were so many great films and just inspired me. Yeah, you should look it up sometime.
Can are these short films available for everyone to view, or are they kind of just specifically for NBC at this point?
Well, I know Groundhog Day for a Black Man is on YouTube. The others, I'm not quite sure, but yeah, Groundhog Day for the Black Man, it actually won Critics' Choice and Best Comedy for that festival.
Can you tell us a little bit more
So
about that one?
it's actually similar to this indie film I did called Driving While Black that did really well on the festival circuit. It's basically a satire of, what African Americans have to deal with cops and
Hmm.
that whole controversy. But they presented it in such like a comedic way that everyone can appreciate. So I don't want to say any more. You just have to watch. It's on YouTube. So it's funny.
So it's handling the problems of our times kind of the same way Mel Brooks did by just kind of presenting it
Yeah,
in its starkness, but also with a comedic touch.
that's that's a great comparison. Very Mel Brooks.
Okay. Um, your projects that you're currently working on, we know Driving While Black. Where can people see that, or is that slated for release?
It's slated for release, actually. The executive producer had negotiated distribution recently, so I'll definitely keep you posted on that. But in the meantime, if you go on Facebook and search Driving While Black or our website, www.dwbthemovie.com.
Okay.
And you can see like all the awards we've won, the trailer, and it was a great film. I just wish that more people could see it because we had several screenings, but now just getting it into the theaters, like we had mentioned before our interview about how a lot of indie houses are closing down, whereas I feel like there should be a revival of it because people want to see, new works that go against the grain and are revolutionary or innovative. So,
Um, would it be beneficial to start using different mediums of distribution for films like those? Like Vimeo has their video on demand stuff where you can upload something and charge people to watch it. Would that be an avenue worth taking, or is there too much red tape through Hollywood to not be able to do that?
well, because I haven't really worked in the distribution side of things, from what I've heard is that a lot of these films don't make much money
Hmm.
from a lot of those platforms because it's just saturated with a lot of content, and it becomes a complicated like system of how like an executive producer can get the most bang for their buck,
Hmm.
essentially, with all these different platforms. So yeah, I know that that's an option, but like you said, there's probably red tape and probably not as much incentive. So you have to get I guess, the best distribution deal.
Yeah, it's kind of sad because that seems like distributing through VidMe or through Vimeo would be the easiest way to get it into the hands of people that want to watch it. Because people
Mm-hmm.
on the East Coast like me, if we know about a film, there is no way for us to watch it. Like with
Mm-hmm.
Sylvia Chomet's The Illusionist, I couldn't find it
Mm-hmm.
anywhere. I had to buy a UK DVD and buy a region-free DVD player to actually watch it because it didn't get distributed
Wow.
for I think 3 years until it finally showed up in the US. If there was another way to watch it, I would have gladly paid $20 to rent it and watch it. So I don't. I guess we as consumers of the media need to, I guess, make it more known that we are willing to pay a decent premium to watch the films that we just can't get here. But
Hmm.
how do we voice that in a way that the studio is going to listen? I mean,
Right.
vote with our wallets, write them emails. I mean, how can we make that movement something?
Well, that's tough though, because yes, you might be willing to pay $20 for that, but I'm sure a lot of people share. It could be like four different people sharing the same Netflix account.
Right.
And if they're watching the movie, it's, how is that movie making any money
Hmm.
off of that? So, yeah, I feel like you are the best case scenario for those platforms to make money for movies, but I feel like you're pretty much like the minority. I think a lot of people try to cut corners and
Hmm.
stream and try to find content for free, so it hurts the whole industry in that way.
Is it going to hurt the industry enough where we're going to start losing talent, or are we just gonna have to keep pushing on with the old system and hope it works out for the best?
I feel like what do you mean by losing talent?
Like
By
people that just get fed up because they can't get their work seen. Like if I were to make a movie and
uh
I just can't, no one seems to want to get it, but then no one wants to rent it when I do make it available. It's like there's no good solution for some filmmakers, that they could just get fed up with just the way the system works now.
Yeah, it is frustrating, and I've heard that voice from a lot of my filmmaker friends, and even in my own process of creating content. I mean, it's really hard, you know. I can't say what formula works because there's many different ways to get people to watch things. I think it starts off just what's the goal?
Mm-hmm.
If the goal is to make money, then you have to go to a different avenue. If it's to be seen, there's a lot of opportunities now, as you said, like YouTube, Vimeo, everyone can be seen, you know, things can go viral like within a day. So it just depends on your goal.
Are there any particular studios that are more indie friendly than others?
Yes. I mean, you mean like big studios?
Yeah, big studios.
I don't know about big studios. I feel like if you do well in the festival circuit and you go to like cons or, you know, what have you, you go to those big ones, and then you catch the eye of the studio exec, I'm sure, you know, you have a possibility of being picked up. But, you know, it just has to be really, really something marketable and really, really good content.
Mm-hmm. For those looking to get into the business, you know, we know it's a grind, it's very tough. What would you suggest for those new people that are thinking about making that jump to moving out west to pursue this Tinseltown dream?
If I could talk to myself like 5 years ago when I like finally made the jump to Hollywood, really have a plan of action, do a lot of research before you come out here. It's not enough to just get an agent. You know, once you secure the agent, which is like one of the first steps, you have to also know how to play the game. You need to have great headshots. You need to make relationships with casting directors that don't know you. You need to know how to get good reel footage. You know, you can't just do anything. You have to have certain caliber of work to showcase in your reel. So I think if you can focus on those top essentials, then before you come out here, I think you're already ahead of the game.
What makes a good headshot other than just, you know, your standard portrait photo? Is there a specific look that you should have, or you should have several different looks to distribute based on the project?
So I've actually directly asked a casting director about that because I've heard different things. And I know in booking Ray Donovan, I had a shot of me in a nurse's scrub, and that helped, you know, because sometimes they're just if it's for like a profession, they usually, you know, they don't have that much time, so they just kind of look through pictures, and if you look exactly what they want, then it makes it easier on them. Now, if it's for a role that's more open, it's not like just profession based, you know, then you just bring the essence of who that person is. But really, the biggest headshot and the most important headshot is the one that brings your true essence and who you are. Like exactly what you look like right now. Mm-hmm. Take a picture of that. But of course, like high quality. And that is what's going to set you apart from everyone else. Because I had like glamour shot. I had cop shot, you know, business shot. And I was just going to get dismissed because it's like, well, who is this girl? You know, like every other actor has that exact look, but what they don't have is you everyday you know?
Right.
Your beanie, your skull beanie, and your red shirt.
Like, that's just because it's going to glare too much if I take it off. I do it more as a nicety, so you don't have to see it shine.
But whatever it is, it makes you unique. And right. I find that we're so, we have this pressure to fit into these categories mm-hmm. that we forget to account for who we actually are in these pictures. Yeah, I was missing that. I had everyone, the sexy girl, everyone but who I am day to day. And then once I got that shot in, I've been called more because that is me. That's who I can play. So
And you have to have a pretty good photographer too, because they have to capture that perfect moment. So what does the photographer do to capture you? Do they have to say something, or do they just catch you in a candid moment, or what's that magic formula for catching you on film?
man, that if I knew the answer to that, I would just go to that photographer each and every session. But I've gone to so many different photographers, and I've been with photographers that tell you move a little bit to the right, chin down, think this, or like some of them will micromanage, and that helps me because sometimes I feel like if you're overthinking, you'll tense up your lip or your jaw or you'll crinkle your forehead like I'm angry, or I'm funny, and it's just fake. So I feel like someone who makes you comfortable, a photographer that makes you comfortable, and if you're like me and I get too much in my head, someone who can tell me exactly what to do helps too. So it just depends on what you need as a person.
Okay, fair enough. Um, any other wisdom that you would like to dispense to our viewers?
I think the hardest part for me coming to LA was trying to figure out how I can make a living while I'm pursuing this passion because it's like, yeah, if you're struggling, you're going to have a hard time in the audition room just showing up. Like they can sense that energy, they can sense desperation. So I feel like you have to get to a place where you're comfortable with yourself and also um, not in a mode of survival so that you can thrive in the room. Because when you're just scraping by, which I've experienced and I've done before, it reeks of desperation in the room, and they don't want that on set. They want someone who's strong, who's coming to help them. You make their job easier, essentially. They want you to win. But when you're just scraping by and struggling, they don't, yeah, you're not serving them or their set. So just finding that job, and that's the hard part. What is the perfect actor job? There's so many different options for that.
And
And
the you have to be your time has to be very flexible because you can get a call for an
yep.
audition at the drop of a hat.
Oh
Are
yeah.
employers usually pretty flexible with that since you are working in Hollywood, or do you just kind of have to take the ones that have the weird hours when you know the studio's open?
Right. Well, I mean, this is a constant pursuit of mine ever since I got to town, like figuring out what is the perfect job. And I have friends that are chauffeurs because it's flexible. I've done waitressing, of course. Almost every actor in LA is as a waiter, is in the service industry, hospitality industry. I was very lucky to find a job where I work with children with special needs. And I've been doing it since, well, I first started waitressing, but I quickly found out it's way too stressful. It doesn't necessarily always pay that much. And everyone else is an actor, so they're probably going to steal the best shifts for the actor. So it was cutthroat. I felt like it was an industry within an industry that was just as competitive. So I moved away from that, and I had a background in working with kids with special needs, so I was lucky, and I've been at my job for a while that every time I have an audition, they are just so great and flexible. So you need to have a job like that.
So you basically you're getting a reward out of working with these special needs kids, so that brings your stress level down. So either way, if you don't get the audition, at least you're doing something that you love doing. So you're not
Yeah,
you're not just compounding stress.
yeah. I think we had talked about how like actors. I've been this actor before, where you end up having no social life. You're just running after this this dream, and then you lose sight of the rest of your life. Like you lose touch with friends or hobbies because you're so focused on this goal. But if you have something else in your life that grounds you, it will make you a better actor and stronger in the room.
Okay. Well, Sheila,
Yeah.
thank you very much for your honesty and for putting up with some of these very tough and sometimes unfair questions that we just can't answer. We just don't know the answers to. But thank you for your time, and I wish you all the best of luck. And most importantly, where can people find you?
They can find me on Facebook. I have my actor page, Sheila Tejada, spelled Sheila. My last name is Tejada. And I have a website, www.sheilatejada.com. They can IMDb me. They can find me on Instagram. I'm pretty visible online, so that's where they can keep posting all my updates.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Sheila. I hope you have a good night. I'll
Thank
talk to you
you.
soon.
Thank you so much.
Okay,
Bye. Thanks
bye.
for having me.